Hello, this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming. Today we're going to talk about critical hits, critical wounds, anti-devastating, and some of the rules that interact with critical hits and wounds. Let's go ahead and dive in. First, we're going to talk about what a critical hit or wound is. Then we're going to talk about lethal hits, sustained hits, the anti-rule, devastating wounds, and how anti and devastating interact. Critical hits and wounds. Critical hits are defined as an unmodified hit roll of 6 and are always successful. And critical wounds are unmodified wound rolls of 6 that are always successful. So this is a pretty straightforward rule, and it's a rule that already existed. We just gave it a name, is all that's happening here. In ninth edition, remember, hit rolls of 6 were also always successful. Wound rolls of 6 were always successful. Now in 10th edition, it just has a name, and that's the only change in that interaction. Lethal hits. Critical hits automatically wound the target. Note that this is not hit rolls of 6, but critical hits. And that's because there are things in the game that could modify when you get a critical hit. If we look at Bolter Discipline right there, it says each time a model in that unit makes a ranged attack, a successful unmodified hit roll of 5 plus scores a critical hit. So that would mean if you had lethal hits and Bolter Discipline, your hit rolls of 5 would auto wound as long as you're in your Devastator Doctrine. So bear in mind that it's not restricted to only hit rolls of 6. It just bases at hit rolls of 6, and there are rules that can modify that or change that. Now let's look at sustained hits, and this is critical hits generate an additional hit equal to X. So if a rule has sustained hits, 2, like the Centurion Assault Squad here, it has sustained hits 2 on its Annihilator protocols. That means its critical hits will count as 3 hits because you'll get 1 hit for your die roll, your critical, and then you get 2 additional sustained hits for a total of 3. And what this means is in most situations, a hit roll of 6 will just be 3 total hits for this specific unit. Obviously, if it had sustained hits 1, then it would be 2 hits. If it had sustained hits D3, it would be 1 plus a D3. So again, a fairly straightforward interaction, but I wanted to make sure we broke it down for everybody because I have seen some people online that have been a little confused about how this stuff interacts. Anti-X. Weapons with the anti-keyword X score critical wounds against the proper keyword target on a die roll of X or higher. And I know that's kind of a weird way to say it, but really all it means is that each anti-rule will have a triggered keyword like anti-infantry, anti-vehicle, anti-monster. And then X is the die roll that you need for anti to proc. So if we look at the combi gun from the Primaris Captain here, it has anti-infantry 4 plus, which means against infantry, wound rolls of 4 are critical wounds, which means wound rolls of 4 are always successful. And that's all that means. Now, if we look at the Chain Fist, it has anti-vehicle 3 plus, and that just means all wound rolls of 3 or higher are critical wounds and always successful. Let's take a look at devastating wounds. We'll just pull that Primaris Captain's profile up again because it has all the rules that we're going to be looking at. And what that is a critical wound inflicts mortals equal to the damage characteristic of the weapon instead of normal damage. So really what that means is if you roll in most situations, if you roll a 6 and it's a 1 damage weapon, it just does 1 mortal and that's it. We don't roll any armor saves, it's just mortal end. However, if we look at interactions between the two, devastating wounds is actually pretty powerful, especially in a faction like Space Marines, where you get Oaths of Moment and you can just reroll against units. You can pick one unit and you get to reroll the hit and the wound roll. So devastating wounds is powerful, especially with reroll. Anti is powerful, but when you combine the two, you effectively just get a mortal wound attack rather than following the standard hit wound save interaction. So again, looking at the combi weapon, it's effectively just a mortal wound gun because it critically wounds on a 4 plus and then devastating wounds procs on a critical wound. So any wound of a 4 plus is just a mortal wound against infantry. So it's effectively just, again, like I said, a mortal wound gun. And that's one example. Let's take a look at one more. If we look at the twin Drukhari Haywire Blaster that was released on the Faction Focus, we see that it gets 2 attacks. It is twin linked, so it'll re-roll its wounds, and then its damage is 3. It does have anti-vehicle and devastating wounds, which means against a vehicle, it gets a critical wound on 4 plus, and then devastating wounds procs, meaning any wound of 4 plus does 3 mortals to a vehicle. So again, it's a very powerful ability, because what that means is Haywire is going to be exceptionally good at getting damage across at vehicles. That's what we wanted to talk about today. A nice quick video just kind of breaking down some of the interactions in 10th. This is what we're all about. Big shout out to my patrons, Captain Too Tall, The Real Donnie G, and Lord Wellingstone. You guys have been amazing supporting me as I continue to grow my channel. Thanks for watching. I've got links on the screen and links in the description. I'm going to be going live later today looking at whatever faction indexes are released. Join me then.